Benedicite Dominus, and welcome to question 168 of the Secunda Secundae of St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. The topic for this lecture is modesty as decorum, or modesty in outward actions. It has multiple names. So we are looking at the potential parts of temperance, and we've just been looking at modesty, and within modesty are 4 parts. Humility was the longest one. Studious was very fast, and now we're moving on to 2 more fast ones: modesty as decorum and modesty in apparel. So let's just jump right into it. It's only 4 articles long, so it's a fairly average size one, maybe a little on the short side. Okay, so does there need to be modesty in outward bodily movements, in how we act in the world? Does there have to be modesty in our actions? Right? St. Thomas starts with beautiful lines from St. Ambrose, really beautiful readings. Makes me want to read that letter of St. Ambrose in its entirety. He says, "Beauty of honesty pertains to virtue. Outward movements pertains to the beauty of honesty." So what should our outward movements be? Our decorum, what should our decorum be? It should be beautiful. It should be honest, right? Kind of claritas, right? It's clear, like clear water that you can see to the bottom, right? It's transparent. It's not hiding anything. It's just good, right? It's just goodness, straight through, unmodified. And you see it within beauty and honesty and motion, and then nature as well. St. Ambrose says, "Let nature be our model. Her reflection is gracefulness of conduct and beauty of honesty. Therefore, there is virtue about the style of outward movement." Right before that, he goes on to say he's not looking for dainty, feminine speech and actions. These he doesn't like, and he doesn't like these coarse and boastful actions. He says, just give me nature, right? And in some ways, this is very apt for the time, right? Don't try to become, a girly girl. Don't try to become a manly man. Just be yourself, right? Just act according to your own nature, right? Which is a balance, right? We're balanced people. The world made up of Barbie dolls and G.I. Joes is not a very good world. I don't know how a Barbie doll and G.I. Joe could ever be happily married together. There must be more common ground, right? Now, movement is considered in twofold. And St. Thomas, he doesn't get entirely clear with this, so there's room for some interpretation. And he's taking this from Cicero. So it's a bit of quoting here. Andronicus, that's who he takes some of it from too. In respect to the person, which is taste or natus, I think this is more like what St. Ambrose was just talking about. With respect to the person, it's just having that proper beauty and honesty in nature, right? That's the goal here. And then the second one is with respects to externals, which is methodicalness, right? Methodical, right? According to right method, right? Bon ordination, a good order in terms of the external. So there's within itself and then circumstances, which is often what we are dealing with here. And we're going to get into that in the next question, so I won't go into much more, but clearly it makes sense that things have to be considered in themselves and then in their situation, right? Now, how about virtue in games? And really what he's talking about is joking or playfulness. That's what he's not really talking about, how to be virtuous in the game of Monopoly or something like that. It's not not really like that. And it starts with a great quote from St. Augustine in a document written on music. And I actually didn't know that he had a document written on music. I know St. Augustine wrote on everything, but I didn't know he had one specifically on music. He said, "I pray thee, spare thyself at times, for it becomes a wise man sometimes to relax the high pressure of his attention to work. It is good to rest. It is good to have leisure." Another line from Cicero, "We have recourse to sleep and other kinds of rest when we have done our duty by grave and of serious matters." So after we've done, right, a hard day's work, it is good to sleep and rest, right? You need it for your body. If you worked hard, you need to sleep and rest. Likewise, for the soul, if you have done the right amount of seriousness and grave matters, you've done your prayers, you've done your work, you've fulfilled your family duties, you've done what you needed to do as an adult. There should be time left over for some type of rest and leisure and laughing and joy, right? It's not at the expense, but in conjunction with the serious matters of life. He says you can be joking in three ways. One is it should not be injurious or indecent words or deeds. So if your joking comes at the expense of another person, then it's not funny. It's not a joke. If it's indecent, right, it's crude matters, right, which is what most comedy is nowadays. If you ever watch comedy, it's mostly just indecent words and deeds. But so that's not a proper joke that is virtuous. But if it's not injurious and it's not indecent, it can be perfectly fine, right? Things like dad jokes, for example, right? Dad jokes are usually not indecent or injurious to anyone. Usually just a play on words, and they're a bit funny. It should not offset the balance and harmony of the mind. This is a good one too. So it's really dealing with the proper balance, right? If you find this leisure time, maybe it is playing a game like a video game or something like that. If you spend all night playing it and now you're exhausted in the morning, well, it wasn't that fun, right? If the balance and harmony is off, it should have the proper balance, right? This is the orderedness that we talked about in the last slide, right? Good order. So again, it should be balanced and harmonious types of joyfulness, right, in the proper time. If you think of a convent, right, they have particular hours of recreation. Well, that's to play games and relax and to joke around a little bit. And probably, it comes after, usually you go to prayer, you go to dinner, you have a recreation after dinner, and then after that there's a period of rest, and then a few minutes of rest, and then you go off to chapel to do night prayer, something like that. Right? It's balanced with in harmony with prayer, work, end of the day, meals, things like that. And lastly, it should be befitting time and company. So who you are having your joking time with really should matter on who you're having it with and when you're having it. So, telling a little joke or a little smirk or something might be fine, right, during recreation. It's not fine during the consecration at Mass, right? The time matters. And joking around with your close friends matters, but if you're at your job and you're supposed to be professional and you're joking around, it might not be correct because it's not the proper company, right? If you're like a priest meeting with a family after somebody has died would not be the time to start telling jokes, trying to cheer them up. Not the appropriate company, not the appropriate time, right? That would be an example. Well, how about play in excess, right? Is it sinful? Well, of course, everything in excess and deficiency is sinful. So in the proper mode, right, it's good, and in excess deficiency, not so good. So everything is really according to right reason. That's what is the most important thing. Again, excess and deficiency fall short of right reason. So by excess, a person can be, and this is according to Cicero or Tullius, St. Thomas calls them, excess of play is discourteous, insolent, scandalous, and obscene, right? So if anything you're doing in terms of joking around is discourteous, insolent, scandalous, or obscene, it's probably not a joke anymore. It's an excess and a vice. Now, excess of play can also be due to time and circumstances, as we just pointed out. So, joking around during the consecration would be the wrong time and place. Perhaps the exact same joke with the exact same person during recreation would be perfectly virtuous, right? So time and place matters. Play is necessary for the intercourse of life, St. Thomas says. And an example he gives is of actors, right? If acting was if all play were bad, then actors are always playing. Therefore, they would, be the most sinful people. But he says actors can be very holy people. A jester can go to heaven. A court jester can go to heaven. So as long as an actor knows when to stop acting and playing and prays and lives their own life moderately, moderating their passions and operations, their actions, and they give alms to the poor, they could be a saintly actor, right? So playing in theater and the lighter things in life are not intrinsically evil. It's just if it's in excess, right, is the problem. And then there's also a deficiency, right? It can also be a deficiency, and this is, St. Thomas says, a deficiency of mirth, right? And this is perhaps what more people struggle with. More Catholics or more serious Catholics might struggle with would be a deficiency in mirth. Just because you could get so serious, right? So intellectual, might not have that sense of joy, right? Enough of that sense of mirth, right? If you hear people often talking about Catholic things, right? Serious Catholics talking about serious Catholic things, it seems like there's no joy at all, right? It's just so serious and so grave, and everything's a sin. Like it makes it, and even St. Thomas, when we do this, we can sometimes fall into that trap. Well, this is either a mortal sin or a venial sin, but it's certainly not good with a lot of these things. So we have to make sure that we have the proper amount of mirth, right? That's the proper virtue. St. Thomas says a man who is without mirth not only is lacking in playful speech, but is also burdensome to others, since he is deaf to the moderate mirth of others. Maybe I'm sometimes guilty of this myself. Everybody's having a good time, and I'm just kind of sitting there praying my rosary, right? Well, that's actually sinful, to think of that. We don't often think of it that way. But if we become burdensome to others are moderately mirthful, and we're sitting there just kind of staring and not laughing and not talking to anyone, that can be burdensome. Those without mirth are vicious, boorish, or rude, according to Aristotle in the Ethics, or at least potentially they are. Now, Aristotle has this wonderful line in the Nicomachean Ethics. He also talks about it in the Eudaimonean Ethics, that we have few friends for the sake of pleasure, since but little sweetness suffices to season life, just as little salt suffices for our meat. This is Aristotle's view of friendship. We live in a time where we want as many friends and followers as possible, even those people we don't even know, right? We have followers online, and people buy thousands of followers because they want that to validate them in some way. But Aristotle was quite the opposite. He thought we want to have very few friends. A lot of friends are just friends because of convenience, and a lot of friends we have because we need something from them or they need something from us. He wants us to be relatively independent so that we don't have to associate with people just because we need them or they need us. But they're people who we actually enjoy being around, which is a novel idea. And he says you would have very few of them, but you would practically live with them. They'd be very close to us. They would be the people of our day-to-day life, but they would be few and far between. Not that you're not friendly with everyone else, but that if you're a real friend, you have given permission to challenge you, to help you, support you, to push you. You learn from each other. It's a growing experience. It's friendship in Aristotle's view. And with that, to have mirth with them is not the same as having mirth in a big group of strangers, right? A lot of us might have anxiety issues in a large group of strangers. Might not be that much fun, right? We'd rather just stay home. But think about this in terms of your good friends, right? If you're with 3 or 4 of your best friends, are you just going to sit in the corner and keep your mouth shut and not even talk? Probably not, right? With your close friends, you would be open and joyful, right? And if you're not, you would probably be difficult to be around, right? If you're with 3 of your friends and you don't say anything and you don't engage in the conversation, probably a strange friendship. You might not get invited back, right? But this would be actually sinful because it's a deficiency. If somebody has social anxiety, then that might be a different thing. But if you're choosing not to even participate, that would be an issue of a deficiency in mirth. So in conclusion, there's virtue in bodily movements. It's really modesty, right? Modesty in bodily movements. It moderates, right? Modesty moderates, not too much, not too little. There's a virtue in games. There should be a certain joy in life. There's a certain time of the day and a time of life to have leisure and to relax and to have rest for the soul. There can also be excesses of play, right? It can be too joking around too much, right? Wrong time, wrong place, too much, wrong subject matter. There can also be a deficiency in mirth, which is true seriousness, not joyful, in situations which should be joyful and more relaxed, right? This would be what is the proper balance, is not excess and not deficient in this. Okay, well, next we move on to modesty in outward apparel. So that will be the end of the potential parts of temperance once we get through the next one. Okay, see you then.